Have you noticed it? Not the loud ones, not the influencers preaching enlightenment from stages, but the quiet ones, the ones who used to shine a subtle light, who used to walk into a room and change its atmosphere without saying a word. They're disappearing. No farewells, no declarations, just gone. You might catch it in passing. A deactivated profile, a text left on read, a friend who once spoke about inner journeys, but now answers with long silences. They haven't become cold. They haven't gone dark. They've gone inward, and the world doesn't know what to make of that. But here's the truth. No one's saying out loud. Sometimes awakening doesn't look like expansion. Sometimes it looks like withdrawal, not because of arrogance, not because of defeat, but because the awakened soul is no longer willing to perform. The invisible error of spiritual visibility. We've been sold a glamorous idea of awakening. Be more radiant, be more vocal, be more spiritual, more often. Post about it, share the light, teach, lead, guide, inspire. But Alan Watts, and others who walk through silence, warned us, true awakening often leads you away from the spotlight, not into it. There is a moment, subtle but irreversible, when a person realizes that even their spiritual identity has become another costume. The awakened one, the healer, the conscious influencer, these are just more names, more roles, more noise. And if you're listening closely, really listening, you'll hear the whisper that comes after the applause dies down. This isn't it. This, too, is part of the performance. And so the awakened disappear. Not because they're better, but because they're done pretending. They stop selling their growth. They stop posting their meditations. They stop answering the call to show up in ways that demand the suppression of their silence. Because silence has become more honest than any post. Stillness has become more powerful than any ritual. And if you're feeling that tension right now, the desire to be seen, but also the overwhelming need to vanish, you're not breaking. You're breaking free. From expansion to implosion. When awakening folds inward. Let's get honest. You're not tired because you're weak. You're tired because you're awake in a world that rewards unconsciousness. You're exhausted not from lack of purpose, but from having to pretend in rooms where your truth is not welcome, where you must dilute your knowing so others can stay comfortable in their forgetting. There comes a moment when the awakened can no longer hold the performance, not even the spiritual one, because they see it all. The projections, the repetition, the hunger for recognition dressed as service, and the sacred work becomes returning to invisibility. So they stop, they unplug, they delete the apps, they cancel the workshops, they stop being a character in the spiritual story, and instead, they return to the blank page. No label, no mission, just breath, just being. They do this not out of defeat, but because consciousness, real consciousness, can no longer live in the marketplace of performance. A gentle invitation? Try this for 24 hours. Want to test where your own identity is still performing? For 24 hours, don't speak about spirituality. Don't post a thing. Don't mention the journey. Don't try to be wise. Don't seek approval. Observe what rises, the discomfort, the craving to be seen, the echo of your identity, asking, if no one knows I'm awake, am I still? That's where the work is. That's where the truth lives. Because if awakening becomes another way to be validated, then we haven't awakened at all. We've only relabeled the ego, when the vibration no longer fits. At first, you try to stay in the friendships, the routines, the conversations that used to feel safe. But they start to vibrate differently. The laughter feels hollow. The stories feel scripted. The energy feels off. Not because they've changed, but because you have. Your frequency has shifted. And here's the thing, no one prepares you for. You will feel like a stranger in the very life you once built. You won't be able to explain it. You'll try to find the words, but they'll fail. Because this isn't about preference. It's about resonance. And when something no longer resonates, staying becomes a betrayal, not of others, but of yourself. You'll begin to crave quiet, not silence that punishes, but silence that heals. You'll begin to recognize which places drain you, which conversations shrink you, which relationships only recognize the version of you that no longer exists. This isn't ego, this is clarity. And once you taste that clarity, something irreversible happens. You choose solitude, not as escape, but as alignment. You stop fighting to fit in where your soul no longer belongs. And in doing so, you begin to remember the truth. Awakening is not about becoming more visible, it's about becoming more true. There's a moment that no one warns you about. It's not loud, it doesn't announce itself. But one day, you enter a room and something feels off. The energy is flat, the conversation feels like static, the laughter no longer lands. And suddenly it hits you. I don't belong here anymore. But not because you've become arrogant, not because they've done something wrong, but because your field has shifted, and what once felt like home now feels like exile. This is the pull of non-belonging, and if you ignore it long enough, it doesn't just nudge, it rips. Because once your consciousness expands, you begin to feel life differently, not as ideas or beliefs, but as vibrations, frequencies, resonances. And when the music changes inside you, it becomes painful to keep dancing to the old song, when the body becomes the messenger. At first, you may think it's fatigue. You're tired around certain people. You feel drained in some rooms. You walk away from gatherings with a strange sense of depletion, like your soul spent the whole time holding its breath. But this isn't emotional burnout. This is energetic mismatch. Your nervous system is trying to protect you from slipping back into unconsciousness. Your field is no longer compatible with certain frequencies. And the cost of staying? Not just discomfort, but slow erosion, because you can't unfeel what you felt. You can't unknow what you've seen. And when you try to shrink back into what no longer fits, your entire being whispers, "This is not your home anymore." Mapping the invisible, a vibrational inventory. If you're reading this and nodding, not in your head but in your bones, it's time to see clearly what your body already knows. Try this for 1 week. Create a vibrational map of your life. Each day, notice where your energy rises and where it sinks. Which people make your breath deepen and which make it tighten? Which spaces feel like air and which like static? Which conversations light you up and which leave you subtly anxious? Be honest, even if it's inconvenient, even if it's someone you love, even if it's a place you thought you'd never leave. Then circle 1 or 2 environments that drain you consistently, not out of punishment, but as an experiment. Step back, even just temporarily. Notice what returns in their absence. Peace, creativity, breath. This isn't about judgment, it's about hygiene, energetic hygiene. You clean your house, you filter your water. But who's filtering your field? Who's protecting your subtle system from unconscious entanglements? It has to be you. The silent burnout. Here's what no one tells you. You don't just burn out from doing too much. You burn out from being too much of who you're not for too long. You burn out from smiling when your heart is silent, from nodding to stories you no longer believe in, from staying in roles you've long outgrown. This is the burnout of the awakened. And it doesn't look like collapse. It looks like disappearance. Not because you're broken, but because your soul is trying to recover from the damage of pretending. Let's be honest. Pretending is exhausting, even if it's noble, even if it's spiritual, even if no one sees it but you. And so, you disappear, not to escape, but to breathe. To let your nervous system detox from the noise, to let your inner truth realign without having to translate itself to a language that others can accept. This isn't weakness. This is wisdom. The myth of consistency. The world teaches us to stay consistent, to be the same person everywhere, to keep showing up no matter what. But real consciousness evolves, and when you evolve, some places just stop fitting, not because you're better, but because you're becoming different. Your frequency sharpens, your field clears. You're no longer willing to stay in spaces where your soul is muted. You begin to understand that belonging is not about staying, it's about aligning. And when alignment calls, it doesn't always come with instructions. Sometimes it just comes with a heavy sigh, a growing silence, a knowing you can't unknow. And the bravest thing you'll ever do is listen. Conscious withdrawal. Running away, let's be clear, this isn't about ghosting life. This isn't about quitting everything and running to the mountains. This is about choosing where your energy is honored, where your truth doesn't have to shrink, where your breath doesn't have to apologize. Because staying in low-resonant spaces for the sake of loyalty or comfort will cost you your clarity. And the world doesn't need more confused souls playing roles they've outgrown. It needs awake ones, aligned ones, who are brave enough to disappear when the time comes. So if you're in that place, if you've felt the fading interest in the parties, the small talk, the games, the noise, let that awareness lead you. Let it be the doorway to the next part of your journey. Let it be the signal that it's time to create space, not forever, not as exile, but as preparation for what you're becoming. There comes a point in the disappearance, a quiet, almost imperceptible shift, when the solitude no longer feels like absence. It begins to feel like arrival. The world outside is still loud. The old invitations still come, but something in you has changed. The silence no longer aches. It heals. The emptiness no longer hurts. It reveals. And from that stillness, a new question arises. Now that I've withdrawn, what happens next? Because disappearing is not the end. It's a cocoon, a recalibration, a sacred pause between who you were and who you are becoming. But here's the invisible challenge. How do you return to the world without returning to the performance? You're not meant to stay hidden forever. Let's be honest. It's tempting to stay out there, in the quiet, in the retreat, away from the projections, the chaos, the noise. But awakening is not exile, and consciousness is not meant to be hoarded. There comes a time when the inner light, so carefully rekindled in solitude, wants to find expression again, but not in the old way, not as performance, not as identity, instead as presence, as someone who no longer needs to prove anything, as someone who no longer asks for permission to be whole. And that kind of return, a conscious reintegration, is perhaps the most advanced form of awakening. The three-phase re-entry, a map back to the world reintegration, doesn't mean going back. It means going forward, with intention, not repetition. Here's a simple process to guide that return. 1. Inventory the identities you've outgrown. Sit in silence. Feel who you used to be. What roles did you play in the world that no longer feel real? The loyal friend who never said no. The overachiever masking emptiness with output. The spiritual guide who always had the answers. The partner who kept peace at the cost of their truth. Name them. Write them. Thank them. Then let them rest. These versions served a purpose, but you're not here to live your past. You're here to meet your next self. 2. Face what you're still afraid to release. Not everything lets go easily. Some attachments linger, not because they nourish, but because they're familiar. The fear of disappointing others, the craving for recognition, the need to be liked, the fear of being alone, for real this time. This is the shadow work that most skip, but the awakened do not avoid their shadows. They invite them to the table. They listen without judgment. And they ask the question that unravels every mask. Who am I trying to protect by staying small? Because often the fear of letting go is not about losing something. It's about losing someone we used to be. And when we surrender even that, something miraculous happens. We begin to feel whole without performance. 3. Design your return with conscious intention. You don't go back into the world as the same player. You return as a creator, as a builder of new ways, not seeking approval, but offering alignment. Ask yourself, where can I show up with presence, not pressure? What kind of relationships honor who I've become? What spaces allow me to breathe, not perform? What work lets my soul speak, not my mask? Reinvention isn't a luxury, it's a responsibility. Because the world doesn't need more awakened people pretending to be asleep just to fit in. It needs truth, embodied, lived, offered freely, without the need to convert or convince. The edgewalker, living between worlds. Some never return, some lose themselves in silence, but others, the rare ones, they return differently. They become what I call frontier dwellers. People who live on the edge, not quite inside the dream, not quite outside it, present but not absorbed, engaged but not entangled. They don't force awakening on others. They don't preach from mountaintops. They just live, authentically, quietly, powerfully. And by doing so, they become beacons, not because they're trying to be, but because truth always shines without effort. These are the ones building small sanctuaries, not empires. They gather in soft spaces, outside the spotlight. They speak in tones that resonate, not dominate. They offer frequency, not dogma. They are not escaping the world. They are remodeling reality from the edges. 2. Those still disappearing. If you're still in your quiet place, stay. Let the stillness finish its work. Let the shadow finish its integration. Don't rush to return just because the world misses your voice. You are not gone. You are rooting. You are becoming someone who can hold presence without pretense. Someone who can offer healing without hierarchy. Someone who can speak only when silence has run its course. And when you return, when you choose to, may it be without apology. May it be as someone whole, not better, not enlightened, just real. That's all the world needs now, not more noise, not more awakening for show, but real ones, quiet ones, present ones. This is not the end. This journey you're on, from visibility to invisibility, from participation to presence. It is not a breakdown, it is a blueprint. The same way the seed breaks before it becomes a tree, the same way the caterpillar dissolves into chaos before becoming a butterfly. You are in sacred disassembly, and it is not a retreat. It is a reconstruction. The old world may not understand, but one day it will need exactly what you're becoming. And when that day comes, you won't need to announce your return. You'll simply walk in, real, rooted, radiating, not as someone who disappeared, but as someone who prepared,